Welcome to Question It, the podcast where we rethink health, wellness, and personal growth. I'm Kevin, your host, chief inquisitor, and sometimes guinea pig, exploring fresh paths to a better life. Let's dive into today's episode and get started. Welcome back to another episode of Question It. In today's episode, we're tackling the big question of why do most wellness programs fail and what we can do about it. And today's episode is kind of special actually because I'm not repurposing an old article or an old video, and I'm not using Google's Notebook LM, the AI, to help me create this episode. So I really want to try to have more of a conversational approach and really just chat with you guys, or I'm still talking at you, I guess, but hopefully you'll stay for the whole thing because this topic of wellness is really what drives me and has driven me for decades. And, basically I've been on this mission for myself to try and make life as easy and happy as I can, as often as I can. One way that I'm trying to figure this all out is I want to be able to get out of bed every day feeling well rested and like ready to go. And I'll be honest with you, I do struggle as much as I try to eat well and hydrate and exercise and have work to do and things like that. It always seems so much easier to get out of bed when I'm going on a big trip or I've got a meeting in the morning. But if it's just the day in and day out daily grind of work, even though I love my work, it's tough. Sometimes it's really hard, especially on my own schedule because I'm not accountable to someone. I don't have to be at work at a certain time. It's really just up to me. And this whole idea of wellness comes together, again, just trying to live our best lives and what can we do to do that? And it's interesting because, well, we know wellness, or I see wellness as a combination of all different aspects of health, which we're going to get into in just a second. But when it comes to health and when it comes to wellness, there's no quick fix to health and wellness. There's no magic pill. There's no one and done solution. We need to practice our health and wellness if we want to have our easiest and happiest and feel good lives. We need to practice that every day from birth until death. There's no getting around it. You can't just eat a bowl of vegetables and think, oh, I'm healthy. I never have to eat, well again. So this topic of wellness is just so big, I think, and it's been recognized for a while. I think the industry basically got started in the 1950s with the idea that a holistic approach to health and wellness could really improve people's lives. And I agree with that. That's why I'm here trying to do what I'm trying to do. But it's sort of gotten bastardized over the years and it's really lost its focus. Well, I don't know if it ever really honed in on the holistic aspect because it was so quick that wellness became this total drive toward fitness and nutrition. And while organizations, companies, businesses, things like that, and also schools have adopted wellness. And again, there's a huge wellness industry. I don't know how big it is, but I'm guessing it's well into the $1 billion range. It's really just not working out. And I think I have a good idea why. And that's what I want to share with you today. Again, I've been digging into this for 20 or 30 years now. So I think I've got a pretty good basis. Of course, I'm always willing to be shown new data, new information. And I'm always willing to revise where I stand based on that new information. But for now, I really want to focus on a true holistic and balanced approach to wellness and share that with you. Just bouncing back for a second, it's so funny how companies, let's just talk about companies, not even schools, but let's talk about companies and what so many wellness organizations try to pitch, or, consulting services and even wellness practitioners. Sorry, But if you call yourself a wellness practitioner and you're not covering every aspect of health, then you're not talking about true wellness. You're really only probably talking about fitness or nutrition. Um, so I wouldn't call yourself a wellness professional. Sorry if that bothers some people. But the idea of wellness in organizations became a big proponent because we want to reduce costs, right? There's so much expense in running a business. And if our employees are more well, then they're going to do better at work and we're going to make more money with this organization, or we'll be more effective within this organization. And it's so funny that we think that we're going to, somehow magically reduce our costs because people are, quote, healthier. And again, health usually means physical health. It doesn't mean all aspects of health. And if we think we're going to save drastic amounts of money on our healthcare costs compared to the overall operating budget of an organization, we are just really missing the point. Because when you look at just regular data, the what a company pays in salary is so much bigger a component than what they pay for healthcare costs. I know healthcare costs are a very big cost on the bottom line for organizations, but it doesn't even compare to the cost of salary. And if you lose a good employee because you're not truly nurturing their overall well-being, then that losing that employee and trying to find a replacement, and by the time that replacement is up to speed, is going to cost you way more money than just trying to compensate for their healthcare benefits. And just for the numbers, for every dollar that a company pays for an employee's salary, they pay another 20 to 40 cents. Let's just say 30 cents more for their healthcare costs. So 30 cents compared to that $1, that is a huge discrepancy. So salary is a much, much bigger cost at an organization than the healthcare cost. And the funny thing is that again, most wellness programs really focus primarily on fitness and nutrition, the weight loss challenges, the step challenges, and even getting people to go do their regular maintenance appointments at the doctor. It's like we're trying to improve on something that's already really, really strong. If you look at the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics website, it shows that 97% of employees across the United States show up and work their required 40 hours each week. So what that means is if we think fitness and nutrition, basically the physical health aspect of wellness, is going to improve on this 97% rate of absenteeism, we're already really, really high. People show up to work. And what that means to me is that when a person shows up to work, then they are, quote, physically healthy enough to do their job. They are present there. Okay. But what that doesn't account for is the huge number of people, and I'm going to say it's really about 85%, that people show up to work because they're, quote, physically healthy enough to show up at work, but they're not really working at their best. And that's called presenteeism. So the absenteeism rate is only 3%. That's a pretty low number for absenteeism. But presenteeism, which is where you do show up to work, but you're not really working, you're basically just doing the bare minimum to get your job done and to not get fired, that is orders of magnitude a bigger problem. And so if absenteeism is costing like $1.5 billion, that's a $1.5 billion problem in the United States, presenteeism is a $15 billion problem. It's an order of magnitude bigger problem. And just another little simple statistic that I found a couple years ago is that I think it's 89% of workplaces are considered toxic in some way. So that means we're going to work, we're physically able to get there, but it's a horrible environment for other reasons. And we're going to get into that very shortly. So what we're talking about here is how wellness is so much more than just your physical health. And there are so many resources and so many YouTube channels and so many podcasts and so many consultants and quote professionals talking about wellness, but they're really only talking about physical health, which boils down basically to fitness and nutrition. And I'm sorry, but I mean, I'm an Ironman triathlete. I've been triathlete for more than 20 years. If you think that you can run daily and be well, then you're just totally misinformed and you're missing the whole picture. Or if you think you can do mindfulness practices or meditation and think, oh, I'm totally well, people do that time and again, and they're still struggling. And that's what we want to get to today. So this is why so many wellness programs are failing, because they're not holistic. They only focus on one or two main things, which are probably physical, which don't even matter so much when it comes to school or work, or even just your own personal life. And we try it all the time. Oh, get a good night's sleep, but I'm still stressed throughout the day. Or, eat healthy food, which again, most people don't even know what healthy food is, but eat healthy food or what's healthy for you. And we're still struggling and stressed throughout the day for one reason or another. So what I will say is that if there's any kind of wellness effort that you're doing, and we're coming into the new year, so New Year's resolutions are going to be probably popping up again. If you're practicing or trying to practice any sort of wellness effort, or if you're running any kind of wellness program for yourself or at work or at school, the reason it's not delivering is because it's not truly nurturing the four key aspects of wellness, the four key health aspects of wellness. So no matter what program you're running, if you're not covering all four of these aspects of health on a regular basis, pretty much on a daily basis, then you're wasting your money, you're wasting your effort, and it's probably going to fail, and you've probably seen it fail for months or years or even longer. Now, I know there are a lot of different wellness models out there, but after 20 years or more of digging into this, I've landed on four, and I believe that these four key areas of health really make up the entire wellness picture. And while other people might talk about other models, where they might include financial or social, I feel like I can pretty easily argue how any of those areas are actually subsets of the four that I'm talking about. So I like to think of wellness like the four tires on a car. And they are physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Okay? And just like the tires on a car, you can't just inflate one tire and expect that car to run well. And that's pretty much what we do with physical health. And again, I'm guilty of this myself, trying to be, not trying to be, but being a triathlete for more than 20 years. I can tell you from my own experience, you cannot run or bike or swim your way from your other health issues. It's not possible. You have to nurture each of these different elements of health specifically, uniquely. Sure, all areas of health interrelate and influence each other, but they're primarily nurtured, through one modality or another. So just like the four tires on a car, you can't just inflate one tire and think that car is going to run well, because it doesn't. And if just one tire goes flat, again, that car does not run well. And I think that's where we are in the state of humanity and society, that we are not nurturing our emotional health tire. Okay. So again, I'll repeat it. The four tires, and I call this the Formula 4 wellness, just like a Formula 1 race car, is operating at peak efficiency. For the four tires, or the four areas of health, again, are physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And I actually say those in order of importance. Now, everything in terms of health is going to operate on a scale. You're never going to be 100% perfect. And, it's rare that you're going to be completely at zero, except in physical health, because the way I see it, if you are at zero physical health, you're dead and nothing else matters. So hopefully we're not getting to that point or even close to that point. But we're running on a spectrum, and at any given time, there's going to be a certain amount of air or air pressure in that tire or in that area of health. And we need to regularly nurture, we need to regularly put air in those tires, or we need to regularly nurture and support, again, the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Now, what do I mean by each of these components of health? So I'm going to share some definitions that are going to be kind of different. So I really hope that you will keep an open mind about these definitions, because it's taken me a long time to really land on these. I won't go through the genesis of each definition, but I think they're really important, and I think they're actually a lot more accurate than the current common definitions, even the definitions that we hear from the World Health Organization or the CDC or other, authorities like that. So for physical health, that's basically being able to operate and move through the world without excessive pain or undue stress or inability. And basically, my definition for physical health, that's not really a great one, but I see physical health very much like all of you see physical health. We don't have all these aches and pains. We're not getting headaches regularly. And we can get up and move. We can dress ourselves and do our other activities of daily living, bathe and go food shopping and make food and so on. And that's physical health. And I see that pretty much like everyone else sees physical health. Okay. Now here's where things get a little different. For me, the definition for emotional health is a person's ability to give and receive love, connection, and belonging. Now, I know a lot of people think emotional health is about recognizing and understanding and managing their emotions, but that is actually the definition. You can look it up. That's the definition for emotional intelligence. Okay. And that's very different. So one way to think about it is emotional intelligence is what's happening once you have the emotion. How do you deal with it? Because we all have emotions, men and women, young people and old people. We all have emotions. That's just part of being human. And managing those emotions is important. So emotional intelligence is important once the emotion is already being experienced. But emotional health, in my opinion, is more about why are we having an emotion in the first place. And I would argue, and I'm not going to go into all this today, but I would argue that more often than not, our emotions that we're having in the first place are primarily, but not 100%, but primarily driven by our relationships and connections and how much love and connection we're feeling, giving and receiving. Okay. Now, another issue with the health conversation is with mental health. So often emotional health is thought of as a subset of mental health. And so I think it's often ignored or pushed aside. And if we're having some, challenging emotion, then we think that our brain is broken or something, because our emotions are experienced in our brain, like in our midbrain, our amygdala. But just because emotions are experienced primarily in our midbrain doesn't mean it's a brain problem. Just like our brain or our brain stem is responsible for our heart rate, our respiration, bodily functions like that. If we have high blood pressure or an irregular heart rate, we don't call that a mental health problem, but that's basically being run and managed by your brain stem, which is a critical part of your brain. So I think we really need to separate out mental health from emotional health. My definition for mental health is a person's ability to focus, concentrate, think clearly, perform cognitive tasks. So basically, our mental health is our thinking ability, which is in our frontal lobe of our brain, and our emotional health is how much love and connection we're feeling, which is more so experienced in our midbrain, which is actually a more basic part of our brain, because you've got the reptilian brain, that's your brainstem, then you've got the mammalian brain, which is where your midbrain is, and then you've got your human brain, which is the cerebellum, okay? And everything's happening, from the brain, and it translates through the body and so on. But mental health is more that thinking part, and emotional health is more that feeling, or really that love and connection feeling with other people. Not just about loving and connecting with yourself. It's really about connecting with others, because as a human species, that's how we've learned to survive. Okay? Wow, I should probably try to breathe a little bit more when I'm speaking about all this. I get really passionate, so hopefully this will be a nice little break right now. So when we think about mental and emotional health, they are two completely separate aspects of our health. And the final aspect of health is our spiritual health. And I actually have a big problem with the common thought and common definition of spirituality or spiritual health, because so often spiritual health or spirituality is really all about somebody's connection, again, remember that word connection, to a higher power or a God or a religion. Well, what if you don't subscribe to God or religion? What if you don't subscribe to that person's God or that person's religion? What, you can't be spiritual? Well, you're just as human as the next person. You can be just as spiritual as the next person. So the common definition, in my opinion, is very discriminatory from anyone who doesn't believe in your God or may not believe in God or some higher power at all. Okay? So what if spiritual health was actually our ability to know and pursue our purpose in life? And we can have more than one purpose. But what I mean by purpose is what matters to you at your core, your essence, your soul, your spirit. And if you are nurturing what matters to you, then you're nurturing your spiritual health. And you can have many different purposes in life. You don't have to have just one single purpose. I think that's completely ridiculous, because we all have many interests and many things that excite us and many things that we want to know and learn about and do in this physical life. So you can have many different purposes. You can have big purposes and little purposes. You can have long-term purposes and short-term purposes. And the reason I like this definition so much is because it doesn't discriminate against anyone who believes in a God or religion. So, for example, for me, my purpose is helping to make people's lives, including mine, easier and happier. That's what gets me out of bed each day. Okay? It has nothing to do with God, religion, higher power, or being a part of something bigger. Again, when I say being a part of, that's a common phrase. But what I think people are what they really mean by that is they want to belong to something more than themselves. Or they want to feel connected to a higher power, a God. And again, love, connection, and belonging are the key elements of emotional health. Okay? And the reason I also like this definition for spiritual health around your purpose is that it doesn't discriminate against anyone, especially those who believe in a God or religion. If your purpose in life is to serve God or to serve Jesus Christ, and that's what gets you out of bed each day, great, go do that. I want nothing more for you than to fulfill your purpose. And if that's what drives you, then you are also nurturing your spiritual health. But if God and religion and Jesus and Allah or whatever, if that's not getting you out of bed each day, then that's not what is nurturing you spiritually. That's not nurturing you at your core. Okay. So we've got the four elements of health that make up your overall wellness. So we got physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And emotional health is all about giving and receiving, which most people struggle with, love, connection, and belonging. And then this is where we get into, so often what drives us day to day. And this will be part of another podcast episode. But for now, I would argue that we are driven more by pain than anything else. And there are two kinds of pain that we know of. There's physical pain and emotional pain. In 20 some years, I have never been able to identify mental pain. So it's not like I'm trying to do a math problem and I can't get this math problem correct and it causes me pain. You don't experience pain from that mental challenge like you do from breaking an arm or getting a cut or um or a stomach ache or from being dumped by your boyfriend or girlfriend or from not being included with the popular clique at school or the pain of not feeling that love that you need from your parents or from your teacher or from your boss. And again, I'm not talking about romantic love. That's just a small part of love. I'm talking about love and connection. I'm talking about feeling truly heard and valued and understood by the people who matter most to you. And that's why we so often, not so often, I mean, the research shows that your boss has a greater impact on your overall health and your mental health. But again, I think what they mean by mental health is actually your emotional health. Your boss has a greater impact on your health than your doctor. If you don't feel truly heard and understood and valued by your boss or your teacher or your parent, it hurts. That does feel painful. Okay. And while I'm all a fan of the quote mental health, tools such as mindfulness and meditation and yoga, which is another way to meditate, oftentimes, um, I'm sorry, but there's no way, it doesn't matter how mindful you are at work, if your boss doesn't value you, then it's going to hurt. And no matter how mindful you are, it's not going to nurture that relationship, which is what's supporting your emotional health. And then when our emotional health is not being nurtured, that's what ends up turning into all manner of compensatory behaviors. So a lot of times these behaviors are called mental health issues or mental illnesses, but I don't think that's accurate at all. I think that these behaviors are really just ways that we try to compensate for our emotional pain. So connection and relationships are what nurture emotional health, and emotional health, how good or bad or how strong or poor that emotional health is, how much air is in that tire or not in that tire, that is what's driving our behaviors. And our behaviors can be either destructive, which are obvious, like heroin or alcohol or eating our feelings with, by, eating ice cream after a breakup or something. But our behaviors can also be constructive, such as triathlon or earning more patents. I've got many dozen patents. And for me, finishing more triathlons or getting more patents and being more productive at work, all of which I love doing, was also a way that I have been trying to feel valued by others or by my parents. Of course, we all have to have our own self-value, but again, we are social creatures. We thrive when we work together. It is so much easier, and this is how it's been for hundreds of thousands of years. The only reason we've gotten to where we are today is because we've worked together, right? It is so much easier to hunt for food as a group than as an individual. It's so much easier to cultivate crops for food than it is to try and manage a farm all by yourself. Okay. It's easier to have you and a neighbor or several neighbors building your home and then building their home and then building another home and maybe building a community space than it is to just try to build a home on your own. For the last several hundred years, this idea of individualism has become so much more highly valued, and it's thought of as weak. You're weak, you're less than, you're less valuable if you need help. But getting help, or not getting help, but just working together is how we've gotten this far. And I think that this is a critical element for our own species, that if we don't really come together, really nurture each other, not just socially, but really truly valuing each other, valuing everybody for the unique individual and person that they are, then we're going to continue to struggle with our emotional health, and it's going to show up in our behaviors. And we're seeing these behaviors all over the place. We don't need a special test or an assessment to see if somebody's emotional health is struggling. All you need to do is look at their behaviors. And what I've been saying for a while is the more extreme the behavior, the deeper the emotional pain. So that behavior can be destructive, like drugs or alcohol, or it could be very constructive, like professional athletes or Olympic athletes or actors or social media influencers or whatever, or overachievers. I've worked with surgeons my whole career, and these are some of the people who are struggling the most with their emotional health, and I think that's one reason why they went into their profession. When we become a doctor, then status and value is thrust upon us. So if we don't feel valued just for who we are, mostly because we didn't feel it from our parents, then if we choose a profession, maybe then we'll feel valuable. But then I see doctors becoming overachievers. Not only are they amazing surgeons, but they're also airplane pilots, or they are yacht racers, or they're experts in wine or language or whatever else. It's this overachieving as a way to try to overcompensate for not truly feeling valued or really loved just for being themselves. And the reason I put those two words together is because I believe that in our brain, how valuable we feel translates to how loved we feel. So if I get a better grade, I'm more valuable and I'm more loved. If I score a goal in soccer, I'm more valuable and then I'm more loved. If I get more likes on social media, then I'm more valuable and then I feel more loved. But it's all empty. It doesn't work. And you're constantly chasing the next thing of value, another degree, another certificate, another something, just to feel valued, because you're not feeling truly valued just for who you are. And that's what I really want to have as a big takeaway for this episode. And something else that's really important is, even in the last several years, but even for many decades now, we know how critically important emotional health is. So don't just take it from me, okay? We've got Harvard University's 80-year-long study, a longitudinal study that began back in 1938, that asked the question, what is the key to lifelong happiness? And over this 80 years, and there was a book written in like 2012 called Triumphs of Experience, and there was a TED Talk several years ago by one of the leaders of the study. The overwhelming consensus was that the key to happiness is our connections. Okay? And in 2010, Dan Buettner came out with the Blue Zones book. And more recently, it's a 4-episode program on Netflix, which is very good. And in all the research that he's done, and even in the 14 years since he published his book, he has found, and here's the spoiler alert, but he has found that the key to longevity, because the Blue Zones is all about these pockets in the world where more people are living past 100 years than anywhere else, even in neighboring zip codes and things like that. What Dan Buettner found in the Blue Zones is that the overwhelming part of the equation, And he even lists it out in the last episode in the Netflix series that more than 50% of the longevity equation is your connections and relationships. It's not the food you're eating. It's not, the exercise that you're doing. It's not, the fact that you're walking each day or that you're having your glass of wine or, you eat a Mediterranean diet or you eat a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet or whatever it is. It's none of those physical things. More than 50% of the longevity equation is your connections and relationships. And if that wasn't enough, in 2023, Dr. Peter Attia came out with a book, and he's got a great podcast and great information. So here's a surgeon or doctor, I think he's a surgeon, and he wrote a book, and he's all about data. So data, data, data. He wants to see all the hard data. And he wrote a book published in 2023 called Outlive. Fantastic book, and he's trying to kind of improve upon the medical system, which he thinks is, really not serving humanity. And in this book, Outlive, where he's really focusing on cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and dementia. Those are like the 4 big killers. And what he found through all the data, and again, spoiler alert, okay? So in the first 16 chapters of his book, he talks about all the data and all the things that you can do to improve your life, to live longer and to live healthier longer. And the overwhelming finding was that exercise trumps everything, even diet, okay? But then in chapter 17, the last chapter of the book, he says emotional health, and he's talking about relationships and connections, emotional health trumps exercise. So if you want to live longer, better, the most important thing you can do with all of these different major studies and research that's gone down and been reviewed is to nurture your emotional health. And by that we mean giving and receiving love, connection, and belonging. And I remember back in 2020, just before the pandemic, I was giving a presentation at a conference, and I asked the audience, raise your hand if you struggle to receive a compliment. And every single person except for one raised their hand. If we struggle to receive a compliment is simply a gesture of love. So if we're struggling to receive a compliment, then we're struggling to receive love. Now that doesn't mean we struggle to receive all love in every form, but it just gives you an insight that we do struggle to receive love. So many people will give it, especially people in the service industry, in the healthcare industry. We are giving love constantly to others, but it's so hard to receive that love or that help. And I think that's really exemplified by how much we struggle to receive a compliment, right? Somebody gives you a compliment and you think to yourself, oh, you don't really mean that, or, oh, you dismiss it in some way. Oh, this old shirt, that doesn't mean I've had this forever. Or, oh, wasn't that hard? You can do that. Anybody can do what I've done. They're giving you a compliment. And when we trade compliments that way, when we give it and when we receive it, we get a dose of oxytocin. That's a hormone, and it feels good. It's the love hormone. It's the connection hormone. And when we're releasing that through our body, it feels really good. So we want more of that. And the better you feel, the happier you are, the higher your frequency that you're vibrating at, your energy, then the healthier you're going to be. And that gets into some of the like metaphysics and quantum physics, actually, around energy and the energy of emotions and things like that. But before we go on too long onto that part of it, I just want to really stress how important it is. If you take anything away from this episode, it's that we each need to make sure we are nurturing our emotional health and we prioritize that. And I'm not talking about socializing, having a drink with your buddies or, even going on a run together with a group of people. That's all well and good, but more often than not, that is That's socializing. That's not real connection, or oftentimes it's not. I know there's, exceptions to all the rules and stuff, but we each need to feel like there's someone that we can call at 3 o'clock in the morning if we are in desperate need of help, and that person will be there for us and we will be there for them. Okay. And we know from the data that more than 25% of adult Americans don't have that go-to person in their life. We know from the data that loneliness and isolation is a bigger problem with, I think, like 14 to 24-year-olds than any other age group. But we also know loneliness and isolation is a huge problem with the elderly community. And we also know that loneliness and isolation is a big problem with men over 40 years old. So there are all these different demographics where we don't feel truly loved and valued and connected with the people closest to us. And that's what's taking the air out of our emotional health tire. If we don't prioritize real connection, real sharing, and I'm not talking about sharing all your deep, dark secrets. I'm not talking about gross vulnerability. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown and all of her conversation around vulnerability, but we really need to discern who we can be vulnerable with and who we should not be vulnerable with, because they may take advantage of our vulnerability. Okay. We need to be there for others, and we need others to be there for us. It doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're human. Okay. So a couple of things that I'd love to just recommend, to help nurture your emotional health on a day-to-day basis is to really listen to another person, to try to understand what they're really saying and how they really feel. So listening to understand is key. A second thing is to start learning how to acknowledge and even more so validate another person's feelings and emotions. How often do we share something and it just is like overlooked and not even acknowledged by the person you're talking with? I mean, I know that's how I've grown up and still exist today with my parents. They don't even know how to acknowledge something, much less validate my feelings. I mean, I'll give you an example. I can share with my mom, sorry, Mom, but this is true, and I've told you tons of times. I can share with my mom, oh, I just bought this great new shirt. I got it, on sale at Walmart. It was awesome. It fits me perfectly. And it was so inexpensive and I love it. The next words out of my mom's mouth are, oh, I bought a shirt the other day at such and such a store for such and such a price. And she'll go on for 10 minutes about her shirt. She won't even acknowledge what I was sharing about my purchase and how important it was to me and how happy and excited I am. And when we don't even acknowledge another person, the message that we're sending is you don't matter. You're not worth listening to. Now, I know my mom and dad love me and they support me in all manner of ways. But when I have a conversation with them and they don't even acknowledge what I share, then to me, it's like I don't even matter. I have no value. And again, value translates to love, so I don't feel loved, and that hurts. That causes pain, and a person will do anything to ease their pain. And in the absence of really knowing how to love and connect, give and receive that love and connection, we turn to behaviors. For me, it was probably more on the overachieving side. I don't do drugs. I don't do alcohol. I don't really struggle with depression, although, you know what? I may be in a state of depression, and maybe that's why this podcast started in the first place. I don't know. I'm still working on that. But my behaviors have been more constructive than destructive. And something else that we hear a lot of in the world, and I totally believe this is true, hurt people will hurt people, including themselves. And the hurt that we're experiencing more than anything is that poor emotional health. It's not feeling the love and connection with the people closest to us. And again, people closest to us is really important because we can have thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers and subscribers on social media, but it still feels empty. We still want more because we don't feel really truly heard and valued for who we are. Okay. So first it was listen to understand. Second, it was acknowledge and validate the other person's feelings and certainly their emotions. And third is whenever we're interacting with anyone, including ourselves, is to never shame, judge, degrade, or emotionally neglect that person or yourself. These are the kind of tiny t traumas that build up over time and hurt. And they take so long to heal because we bury them down. And if we do not really take action, and we have to experience that hurt in order to get through it, if we don't take action, then it's just going to manifest in our behaviors maybe for our entire lives. And we'll be struggling kind of with a dark cloud over our head, or again, running that car with a flat tire our whole lives. Now, there can be acute emotional trauma, of course, like when trust is significantly violated, when you're in a committed relationship and the person cheats on you, that can completely destroy emotional health in one fell swoop. And we need to reconcile these relationships. So whatever relationships it is, wherever the emotional pain is rooted, and there can be more than one root to this emotional pain, we need to try and do anything that we can to reconcile and to work through that pain or reconcile those relationships. And sadly, in some cases, the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to end that relationship. It's not easy. It's going to hurt, but that may be the best thing for us in the long run. And it may actually help us live longer, happier lives overall. Okay. And then one last tool that I'll share, there's a little self-promotion, but this is so important to me. This ability to connect with those who matter most to you is why I created the Uchi app. And I've talked about it here and there on this podcast before, but Uchi is a free social app. It is not a social media, but it's an app that you can use with just your family and friends, or maybe a group at work or a group at school. And you can use it to connect in a deeper way with the people who matter most to you. And it has been proven through published research to strengthen relationships and to improve depression. And all you have to do on the Uchi app is answer questions from our database, all kinds of fun and insightful questions, but nothing that's controversial. We don't talk about politics or religion or anything like that. And it's not about trying to get you to share your deep, dark secrets. It's just helping you share, guide conversation, and helping you share how you see the world. What is your perspective on the world? And to hear others' perspectives, again, only your Uchi friends, and you can only read your Uchi friends' answers if you've already answered that question. So there has to be a two-way exchange of information, because if two people aren't exchanging information, sharing, and they're not exchanging to a similar level of depth or intimacy, it's going to be really hard to connect. And I think that's one of the greatest problems with parenting today is that, or forever really, is that, when a kid comes home from school, it's like an interrogation. We ask the kid, what did you do at school today? What's your homework? How was your test? Do you have any permission slips? Where are you going tomorrow? Who did you hang out with? But when does the parent share answers to all those kinds of questions with their child? Now, of course, it needs to be age appropriate, for that child. But if we don't share in a two-way exchange, we're going to struggle to connect. And it's the same thing in schools, which is why Uchi education is such an incredible tool to integrate into any lesson plan, because we know from research that the number one most important element of education, it's not the books, it's not the curriculum, it's not the pens and paper or the slate and the pencil, it's not the overhead projector, it's not the desks or even the building. The most important aspect of education is the teacher-student relationship. Now, of course, there's exceptions to every rule, and a lot of teachers do a great job, but so many teachers don't do a great job. I mean, I grew up, I know teachers who tell students what a terrible person they are and that they're never going to amount to anything. That is harming emotional health. And then that creates a belief system, and then that creates pain, and then that student can be on a path that they may never recover from. Okay. So we can use these tools of listening, of acknowledging, of validating, of not shaming, of not judging, like when kids make fun of each other on the playground because they're trying to be more valuable themselves to feel loved. But if we love and value and we don't shame and judge each other, our emotional health will improve. And then the world starts to open up with all the different things that we can do because we're no longer trying to compensate for our emotional pain, because that ends up driving most of our day-to-day behaviors. We're just trying to get through the day and manage our pain with alcohol, with drugs, with depression, with anxiety, with food, with bullying, with narcissism, with gun violence, with war. But when we are really feeling nurtured emotionally, all of those compensatory behaviors go away and we start to really open up and live our best lives. So that's where I'll end today. And I hope you'll join this episode's uchiTribe. Just go to the show notes and click on the link there. If you want help with your wellness program at your school, at your business, or just in your life, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. But really, I just hope this sheds some true light and insight on how we're missing such a critical element of our well-being because we rarely ever consciously, intentionally nurture our emotional health and our relationships, and we don't integrate that into everyday life. And when we do, that's when our lives will be amazing. Okay, until next time, peace, love, and connect. Thanks for joining me on Question It. Remember, growth happens outside your comfort zone, so keep experimenting and embracing change. If you enjoyed this episode, connect with me in the show notes, leave a 5-star review, and request to join this episode's uchiTribe. Until next time, peace, love, and connect.